I go by the name Julia Bennett, and I am 26 years old. For several years now, I have dedicated my time and energy to running a small daycare center that belongs to my family. I am the person who comforts crying children, handles emotional outbursts, and stays behind after hours to clean up messes made from craft projects and snacks. Complaining has never been my nature because I have always held the belief that passion for your work eventually brings its own rewards. That is what I kept telling myself, anyway. One particular evening, I found myself wrapping up administrative tasks in our cramped office space when my mother entered the room alongside my older sister. I hardly paid them any attention until a loud notification sound came from my sister's mobile device resting on the desk surface. A massive payment confirmation appeared on her display, the kind of amount you normally only witness in television advertisements. My sister's expression showed surprise at first, then transformed into a satisfied smile as she angled the device toward our mother for a better view. "Well, that certainly arrived quickly," she remarked in a casual tone. "I really appreciate the transfer. You were quite generous with the amount." My heartbeat stuttered for a moment. Compensated for what exactly? "Hold on a second," I interrupted before my thoughts could catch up with my words. "You received payment for assisting here at the center?" My mother responded without the slightest hesitation, letting out a dismissive laugh and waving her hand as though my question was absurd. "Naturally, I compensated your sister. She completed professional-level work on an important project. You are family, which means your contribution does not require payment." My sister settled back into her chair with that self-satisfied expression fixed on her features, the glowing notification still hovering between us like a physical blow. Something fractured deep inside me in that precise moment. All those late evenings, all those extra shifts without compensation, all those times I reassured myself that recognition would eventually come suddenly felt like an elaborate joke with me as the punchline. I forced down the lump forming in my throat, my wounded pride stinging more sharply than tears ever could. I left the office without uttering another word. Several days passed, and then something completely unexpected occurred. Has anyone ever informed you that you owe your family unpaid labor while simultaneously witnessing another person collect payment directly in front of your eyes? Stay with this story until its conclusion to discover how I redirected that heartless declaration back at them in ways they never anticipated. The following morning arrived, and I walked through the daycare entrance with an uncomfortable tension in my stomach. From an external perspective, everything appeared unchanged. Children were racing around their play areas, parents were hurrying through drop-offs and pickups, and soft cartoon sounds drifted from the entertainment room. But something fundamental had shifted within my own consciousness. Those words from my mother kept echoing in my mind without relief. "You are family, which means your contribution does not require payment." I had always operated under the assumption that my work here held genuine meaning, not only for the children but for my family as well. I had contributed to designing educational schedules, decorating learning spaces, and even arriving on weekend days to prepare special programming. My assumption had been that we were all making sacrifices together as a unit. But the reality I now understood was that two completely different sets of rules existed. One rulebook applied to my sister, and an entirely different one applied to me. When lunchtime arrived, my older sister finally made her entrance, her fashionable heels creating sharp clicking sounds against the hallway floor. For many years, I simply referred to her as my sister when discussing work-related matters. But in that specific moment, the generic term felt like a boundary being established. Veronica. She wore an expensive-looking blazer with her hair arranged in a flawless style, appearing as though her destination was a corporate conference rather than a children's facility. "Difficult night?" she inquired, glancing in my direction with that smug partial smile while I cleaned paint residue from a table surface. I maintained a neutral vocal tone. "It has been busy. The children participated in an art activity today." "How was your evening?" I already possessed knowledge of her answer. "Quite pleasant, actually," she responded with a casual shrug. "Mother finally provided compensation for that project I handled. You know the type of work I mean, branding initiatives, marketing strategies, all those professional concepts that are not really within your understanding. It was about time someone in this organization recognized genuine professional contributions. My jaw muscles tightened involuntarily. So, she actually paid you for that work? Obviously she did. Veronica's eyes displayed a gleam of satisfaction. You cannot reasonably expect professional caliber work to be provided without compensation. That constitutes poor business practice. Professional caliber work. Those particular words landed with the force of a physical strike. I set down the cleaning cloth and turned to face her completely. What about the work that I do? The educational lesson plans I create? The meetings with parents that I cover when you are unavailable? All those days when you cancel your commitments at the last possible moment and I remain here late into the evening fixing the problems you have left behind? Does none of that qualify as professional work? She produced a soft laugh. You genuinely enjoy this type of work. You possess natural talent with children. You are essentially performing activities you would choose to do regardless. It is not remotely comparable to what I contribute. I bring visibility to the organization, I secure sponsorship opportunities, and I facilitate growth. Your role is simply maintaining existing operations. Besides, Mother already explained this to you, did she not? Family members help each other. You of all people should comprehend that concept. How interesting, I stated, keeping my voice deliberately low. Because you are family as well, yet you are collecting payment. Veronica's smile transformed into something sharper and more calculated. Perhaps if you developed the ability to think on a larger strategic scale, you would stop obsessing over insignificant amounts of money. That was the precise moment when I comprehended something deeply unpleasant about this situation. This went beyond simple favoritism. In their perception of things, my labor was expected, automatic, and disposable. Her contributions were valuable, professional, and worthy of compensation. I recalled numerous occasions when I had suggested ideas that somehow transformed into Veronica's projects at a later time, with my name completely erased from any acknowledgement. Did you utilize my ideas in that project? I asked slowly and deliberately. The sensory play corners, the Parent Connection newsletter series, the social media content featuring children's artwork? Those concepts originated from me. She rolled her eyes in an exaggerated manner. You mentioned some concepts in casual conversation. I am the person who packaged them into something marketable. That represents the fundamental difference between someone with a hobby and someone with strategic capabilities. Hobby. Strategy. The labels revealed exactly where she had positioned me on her private hierarchy of importance. I am not your unpaid source of creative ideas, I stated clearly, nor am I Mother's assistant without compensation. I deserve treatment that is fair and equitable. She leaned inward just enough that her words would reach only my ears. Then perhaps you should stop behaving like assistants and start behaving like someone who cannot be replaced. Her words ignited a spark of both rage and clarity deep within my consciousness. Replaceable. I had been the person actually maintaining operations and keeping this place functional while they performed their roles as businesswomen and visionary. But if their belief was that I could be replaced, perhaps the time had arrived to demonstrate just how thoroughly I understood this daycare's operations, possibly better than either of them ever had. As she walked away from our conversation, still basking in the glow of her recent payment, a cold and calculated thought began forming in my mind. If my work held no value in their eyes, I needed to determine with precision exactly what my value had actually been to them in documented form. And if they had been exploiting me throughout all this time, I wanted undeniable evidence of that fact. Has anyone ever realized during a single conversation that someone you deeply care about does not perceive you as an equal human being, but rather as convenient free labor? Would you simply swallow that realization and continue forward? Or would you begin searching for the truth the way I was preparing to do? That night brought no relief from the persistent feeling that my entire life had functioned as one extended, quiet discount for everyone in my proximity. Not exclusively at the daycare facility, but within my home environment as well. The more I mentally replayed conversations with Veronica, the more forgotten memories began surfacing from the depths of my mind. Memories I had always dismissed as simply how families operate. I remembered collaborative school projects during my high school years where I had completed the majority of the actual work while Veronica, who was already attending college at that time, had helped me refine my presentation delivery. Later on, she would inform my mother that I would not have passed those assignments without her guidance and mentorship. Somehow the praise always flowed in her direction, never mine. I remembered the summer period when I invested significant time designing a colorful interactive wall for the daycare center. Several months after that, my mother mentioned at a family dinner how Veronica's exceptional eye for design had completely transformed the center's appearance. My name was never mentioned during that conversation. This situation extended beyond financial compensation. This was about being systematically erased from recognition. The next day, after we closed the facility, I made a decision that I could no longer keep this conversation contained only within my own thoughts. I went directly to my home instead of staying late to perform tidying tasks as I typically did. My mother was positioned at the dining table, surrounded by folders and printed financial spreadsheets from the daycare center. My heart began pounding with increased intensity. This was where the important decisions were actually made, the ones I was never invited to participate in. "Mother," I said, taking a seat in the chair across from her position. "We need to have a conversation about what happened yesterday." She looked up over the rim of her reading glasses, her expression already wary and defensive. "If this concerns your sister receiving compensation, I thought we had already settled that matter." "No," I responded, surprising myself with the steady quality of my voice. "We did not settle anything. You dismissed my concerns. There is a significant difference between those two things." Her lips compressed into a thin, tight line. "Julia, please do not start this discussion. I am completely exhausted. Your sister provided assistance with rebranding the center. She brought in new families to our program. She negotiated valuable partnerships. That represents a completely different level of contribution. And what I perform every single day does not qualify as contribution?" I leaned forward in my seat. I am the person parents place their trust in. I am the person who remains here when staff members quit suddenly and unexpectedly. When a child experiences an emotional meltdown or a parent requires a last-minute emergency meeting, I am the one who handles those situations. I have provided years of unpaid work because you told me we were building something together as a family. "You are being overly dramatic about this," she snapped in response. "We operate as a family business. Family members contribute their efforts. Veronica maintains her own expenses and lives a different lifestyle." "There it is again," I interrupted. "She receives payment because she has genuine expenses to cover. What do you imagine my life consists of? Do you think I have some fantasy existence? I pay rent every month. I have student loans requiring payment. I purchase groceries and necessities. Why does her time possess monetary value while mine is worth a thank you message, if I even receive that much?" Her eyes flashed with anger. "Because she assumes responsibilities that you do not handle. You possess talent with children, but she carries the brand forward and manages our public image." I nearly laughed at the absurdity. The brand that is constructed entirely on my work with those children? On the photographs I captured, the programs I created, the relationships I built with families? She packages what I produce, and you write her a payment check for that service. That is not image management. That is using me as free source material. She slammed her writing instrument down on the table surface. "Do not you dare accuse me of using you. I have provided you with a place to work and gain valuable experience. Most mothers would be incredibly grateful for a daughter who can participate in the family's legacy building. You should be grateful for this opportunity." There it appeared again, that particular word that scraped across my nerves like sandpaper. Grateful. Grateful for what exactly? I asked quietly. For being invisible on the official payroll? For watching my ideas be presented under someone else's name? For hearing you state directly to my face that my role is to work without compensation because I am family? My mother's shoulders became rigid. She avoided making eye contact with me, instead flipping through a spreadsheet as though the numbers printed on it held more importance than what I had just articulated. "Life does not always operate according to fair principles, Julia. We all occupy specific roles within this family. Veronica serves as the public face. You serve as the heart. Not everything requires perfect balance in terms of dollars and cents. How interesting, I said with bitterness coloring my tone, because the dollars all seem to travel in one direction exclusively. For a brief moment, silence occupied the space between us. Then she drew in a deep breath. If you do not appreciate the arrangement, no one is forcing you to remain here. But do not accuse me of being unfair when you made the choice to help. You chose to be here. That particular sentence inflicted more pain than all the others combined because it twisted my loyalty into implied consent for exploitation. I chose to believe you would do right by me, I answered. That is not the same thing at all. Her mobile device buzzed with a new notification alert. She picked it up, glanced at the screen, and muttered under her breath, I do not have time for this discussion. We will talk about it later. But we both understood with certainty that later translated to never. I stood up slowly, something raw and sharp forming deep within my chest. If she was not going to admit the imbalance existed, I needed to find another method to show it to her, to Veronica, and to myself. Has anyone ever realized that the people you trusted most in the world were quietly benefiting from your loyalty while labeling that exploitation as love or family duty? At what specific point does helping someone transform into being used by them? And how would you prove that truth if no one in your life wants to listen? I departed from the house feeling hollow inside, as though someone had removed everything soft within me and replaced it with cold steel. I did not return to my apartment immediately. Instead, my feet carried me to the small neighborhood park located a few blocks away, the place I had retreated to after long days at the daycare facility. Not to cry this time, simply to think clearly. I sat on a wooden bench, mentally replaying the conversation with my mother, dissecting every excuse she had offered. Family business, legacy, grateful. Words that sounded noble and honorable until you examined the bank transfers happening behind them. Jules, a familiar voice called out in my direction. I turned to see Tyler walking toward me with his hands in his jacket pockets. He had been my friend since our college years, the kind of friend who noticed when I was upset even when I attempted to hide it. You look like you are about to punch the sky, he said, settling onto the bench beside me. What happened to you? It involves my mother and my sister, I said, releasing a slow exhale. It always involves them. He gave me that patient look he always displayed when he understood I needed to unload my thoughts. So I told him everything. The payment notification on Veronica's phone screen, my mother's declaration about family working without compensation, the condescending comments, the argument at the dining table. By the time I finished my explanation, my hands were clenched so tightly that my knuckles were hurting. Tyler remained quiet for a moment, processing what I had shared. Let me confirm I understand this correctly, he finally said. You've been working there for what length of time? Years, I replied. Since I was a teenager, really. Full-time employment. The last few years have been full-time. And you have never been formally compensated? No contract, no salary, no bonuses, just small cash amounts here and there? She calls it pocket money when she remembers to give it, I admit it. But no, nothing official has ever been established. Meanwhile, Veronica shows up occasionally, repackages my ideas, and gets wired thousands of dollars. He shook his head slowly from side to side. Julia, that is not just favoritism. That constitutes financial exploitation. If this were any other employer, everyone would call it exactly what it is. It is my mother, I said weakly, even though the excuse sounded thinner every time I used it. It is our family business. I kept telling myself things would balance out when the center grew larger. Has it balanced out? He asked directly. Or has it just grown larger for them while you remain stuck in the same position? The question sat heavily in the air between us. I do not even know how to prove any of it, I murmured. To her, everything is justified. She thinks she is doing the right thing. At least that is what she claims. Veronica acts like I am being childish for caring about this. Tyler leaned forward. Do you know who handles the finances? Like, really handles them in detail? Not just the day-to-day operations, but where the money actually goes. Who receives bonuses? What is written in the contracts? My mother and Veronica, I said. They are the ones with access to the accounts, the partnership agreements, all of it. I handle the children, staff schedules, parent communications. I have never been invited into those financial meetings. Then, that is your first problem, he replied. Right now it is your word against theirs.
You feel used.
They say you are helping. Feelings do not win arguments like this. Evidence does. Evidence. I repeated the word, tasting it as both terrifying and empowering. Like what exactly? Transaction records, contracts, emails, messages, anything that shows your contributions and the way they have been rewarding themselves versus you, he said calmly. If you want them to see the truth, or if you ever need to protect yourself legally, you cannot rely on saying I worked hard. You need documented proof. The idea of looking behind the curtain of my family's business operations made my stomach twist uncomfortably. If I dig into that information, they will say I am betraying them. What are they doing to you right now? He asked gently. Is that not a betrayal? I stared at my hands resting in my lap. He was not wrong in his assessment. I had been so busy trying to be the good daughter that I had not stopped to ask whether anyone else was being a good parent or a good sister to me. What if I find something worse than I expect? I asked. What if it is not just about me being unpaid? What if there is real wrongdoing happening? Then you will finally know what you are dealing with, Tyler said. And you will have a choice. You can keep pretending this is just about hurt feelings, or you can decide what your boundaries really are. His words sparked something within me. For years, I had let my family narrate my role for me. Helper, caretaker, unpaid heart of the daycare. But what if I rewrote that narrative myself? What if I stopped being just a character in their story and started being the author of my own? I do not know if I am ready to blow up my family, I confessed. Maybe you are not blowing them up, he replied. Maybe you are just turning on the lights. What they have built should survive that, if it is built on anything decent at all. We sat in silence for a moment, the evening air settling around us. Okay, I finally said. Then I am going to look. I know where some of the financial records are kept at the center. If I can get a clear picture of what is actually going on, what they have paid her, what they have not paid me, maybe I can finally stop doubting myself. Tyler nodded. Whatever you find, you will not deal with it alone. Call me, text me, whatever you need. Just be careful. People do not like it when you mess with their money. His warning lingered in my mind. My family loved to talk about sacrifice and loyalty, but apparently those things only flowed in one direction. If I opened the door to the truth, there would be no going back to how things were before. Have you ever reached that point where you are more afraid of staying in the dark than you are of what the truth might reveal? If you were in my place, would you risk tearing your family's image apart just to see where the money and the respect really went? 2 mornings later, I arrived at the daycare facility earlier than my usual time. The building felt strange and unfamiliar without the usual noise, like a theater stage before the actors arrived for their performance. My heart hammered in my chest, but my hands remained steady. I was not doing anything wrong, I told myself repeatedly. I was just verifying reality. The main office door was usually kept locked, but I knew where my mother kept the spare key. She trusted me with the children, but never with the numbers. Today, I was about to change that dynamic. I slipped inside the office, closing the door quietly behind me. The computer on my mother's desk blinked sleepily in standby mode. I sat down and moved the mouse. The login screen appeared on the monitor. For a second, panic flared in my chest until I remembered the password she had once dictated over the phone when she was rushing and did not think I was really listening closely. I typed it in. The system opened. Bank statements, payroll records, vendor lists, partnership agreements. Files that had always been discussed in vague summaries were now right in front of me, filled with actual numbers instead of slogans about our shared future. I clicked into the payroll reports first. My name was listed there, but only as volunteer coordinator with no salary line, no bonus column, no benefits listed. It was as if the system itself believed I did not exist financially. Then I searched for Veronica's name. Her records told a completely different story. Consulting fees, strategic brand development, campaign bonuses. Each entry carried amounts that made my eyes widen with disbelief. Month after month of transfers. Some labeled as performance incentives, others as extra compensation approved by management. Management meaning my mother exclusively. The total when I added it up was obscene. All that money had flowed to someone who could pick and choose when she wanted to show up. Meanwhile, I had been patching together rent payments with side babysitting jobs when the daycare was closed. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, numb. Then, a wave of anger rushed through me. Not the messy, desperate anger I had felt before, but something colder and sharper. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate system. I started copying everything I could access, downloading PDF files, emailing them to my personal account, taking photographs with my phone. If they decided to lock me out later, I would not be empty-handed. I was so focused on the task that I did not hear the footsteps at first. "Julia," a voice whispered from the doorway. I jerked around, pulse spiking. It was not my mother. It was one of our former staff members. Nina, who had come back to drop off some paperwork for a reference letter my mother had promised her. "Nina," I exhaled, trying to steady my voice. "You scared me." She glanced at the computer screen, then back at me. "You are not supposed to be in here, are you?" "Depends on who you ask," I said. I am trying to understand why I have been working for years and never seen a formal paycheck while my sister has been getting bonuses big enough to buy a car. Nina's expression shifted from surprise to something that looked like recognition. "So, you finally noticed what was happening." "What do you mean?" I demanded. "Did you know about this?" She walked in and closed the door quietly behind her. "I did not know the exact numbers," she said slowly. "But I knew something was off about the situation. Your sister would show up once every few weeks, talk loudly about strategy, and then leave with your mother to celebrate some business win. Meanwhile, you were here every single day doing the real work. Why did you not say anything to me?" I asked, more hurt than accusatory. "Because it was not my place," she replied. "And because when I started asking questions about how overtime was handled and why some staff were not getting promised bonuses, things got tense. I left before it got uglier." My chest tightened. "Wait, other people were being underpaid too?" She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "I was not going to get involved again," she said. "But if you are finally ready to see what is going on, you should know everything." She scrolled and opened her voice recording application. "I did not plan to use these recordings," she explained, "but I recorded a couple of meetings. I wanted protection in case they tried to blame me for anything. Your mother and sister liked to talk in the office when they thought no one was around." She tapped one recording and hit the play button. My mother's voice crackled through the speakers. "Julia loves those kids. She would never leave, even if we do not put her on payroll yet. She knows this is all for the family." Then Veronica's voice. "Why pay her when she is already doing it for free? Once we grow more, we will see. Right now, we need to reward the work that actually brings in money." I felt physically sick. Another recording played. Nina's own voice asking about unpaid overtime. My mother brushing her off. Veronica suggesting they phase out anyone who complained too much. My stomach churned listening to how casually they dismissed people's livelihoods, including mine, as emotional overreactions. Nina paused the audio. "This is why I left," she said quietly. "It was not just favoritism. It was a mindset. Anyone who pushed back was difficult or ungrateful. I did not want to stick around and become the next problem to be phased out." My hands shook as I took her phone and forwarded the files to myself. "Thank you," I managed. "You did not have to share this with me." "Maybe I did," she replied. "Because, Julia, whatever you decide to do next, you need to know you are not imagining things. You are not being dramatic. This is real, and it is wrong." Footsteps sounded in the hallway again. This time, heavier, more familiar. My mother's voice carried through the door, talking to a parent on the phone. I scrambled to close the files and log out, my heart pounding. "Go," Nina whispered. "We will pretend we were just talking about my reference letter." By the time my mother pushed the door open, I was standing at the side of the desk, chatting casually with Nina about her job applications. My mother barely glanced at us, her eyes already on the stack of folders. But I saw her differently now. Not just as my mother, not just as a tired business owner, but as someone who had made very deliberate choices about whose work counted, whose did not, and who deserved to be compensated for their loyalty. I left the office that day with more than just suspicion. I left with proof. If you discovered recordings of your own family calmly justifying why you and others deserve to be underpaid or unpaid, would you confront them quietly? Or would you be tempted to make sure they could never deny it again? Once I had the documents and recordings in my possession, my anger shifted into something more strategic. Rage alone would not change anything. I needed a plan, one that would force my mother and Veronica to face what they had done without giving them a chance to bury the evidence or spin the story. Tyler was the first person I showed everything to. We sat in my small kitchen that evening, laptop open, files spread out, my phone playing those uncomfortable recordings on low volume. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening more with every new piece of information. "This is not just unfair," he finally said. "This is systemic. They built this entire setup on the assumption that you would never push back." "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "They counted on my loyalty, my silence." "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want them to stop pretending this is love," I replied. "I want them to admit what they have done. And I want it to have real consequences, not just for me, but for everyone they have treated like this." "You could go straight to a lawyer," he suggested, "or to whatever board oversees child care centers in the city." "I could," I said slowly. "And maybe I will. But first, I want them to hear their own words. I want them to know I know. After everything I have given them, they owe me at least that much." So we crafted a scenario they could not easily escape from. I invited my mother and Veronica to dinner at my apartment, framing it as a family meeting about the daycare's future. I said I had some ideas for growing the business, and wanted to talk about formalizing my role. The words tasted ironic, but believable. Finally, my mother had said on the phone, "You are thinking about the bigger picture. Veronica will bring some proposals too." Perfect. The night of the dinner, I set the table simply but carefully. It was not about impressing them. It was about control. Tyler was there, not as a visible ally, but as a neutral friend who was curious about investing in child care in the future. His presence made the setting feel less like an ambush and more like a serious conversation. They arrived dressed like they were heading to a pitch meeting. Veronica carried a laptop bag. My mother clutched a folder. "Wow, this looks nice," Veronica said as she walked in. "You did not have to go all out." "I did not," I replied. "I just wanted us all in the same room, without kids or clients or distractions, to talk honestly." We ate for a while, conversations circling around safe topics: work, the economy, future plans. My mother mentioned how lucky I was to have a secure place in the family business. I almost choked on my drink. Finally, I set my fork down. "I think it is time we talk about compensation," I said. The air shifted. My mother glanced at Veronica, then at me. "Compensation. For my years of work," I clarified. "For the roles I have taken on without a formal contract. For the fact that I have been working as full-time core staff while being treated as a volunteer on paper." "Julia," my mother began, already exasperated. "We have talked about this. The daycare has not been profitable enough to pay you a full salary yet. Your sister's contributions are documented." "Very clearly documented," I cut in. "In the payroll reports, in the bank statements, in the line items labeled consulting fees and strategic development and performance bonuses. I know exactly how much she has been paid. I know how often. I know for how long." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "Have you been snooping through confidential files?" I met her gaze. "I have been reading records from my workplace, records that directly affect me." My mother's voice hardened. "That information is sensitive. You had no right." "I had every right," I said, my own voice rising now. "Because while those records show tens of thousands going to Veronica, they show zero going to me. Zero for years. While you have both talked about family sacrifice and shared legacy." They shifted uncomfortably. I did not give them space to recover. "I also know what you say when you think no one else is listening," I continued. I picked up my phone, opened the recording Nina had given me, and hit play. The room filled with my mother's voice. Julia loves those kids. She would never leave, even if we do not put her on payroll yet. She knows this is all for the family. Then Veronica's voice. Why pay her when she is already doing it for free? My mother's face went pale. Veronica's went red. That is taken out of context, my mother said quickly. We were under pressure. I have multiple recordings I cut in, and documents and timestamps. How much more context do you need? So what? Veronica snapped. You are spying on us now? This is psychotic, Julia. Nina recorded those meetings to protect herself, I replied. Because when she questioned unpaid overtime and missing bonuses, you labeled her difficult and talked about phasing her out. You turned people's loyalty into leverage, including mine. Tyler, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. From an outside perspective, he said calmly, this looks very bad, especially if the daycare were ever audited or if someone filed a formal complaint. My mother's head swiveled toward him. And who exactly are you? Someone who cares about Julia, he answered unfazed. And someone who knows this could seriously damage the daycare's reputation and licensing if it went beyond this room. Is this your plan? Veronica glared at me. Blackmail us? Threaten to destroy everything we have built? No, I said evenly. My plan is to stop letting you pretend this is love when it is exploitation. My plan is to make sure I am never again told you are family, so you work for free while watching you transfer money to yourselves behind closed doors. My mother's voice trembled. What do you want, Julia? First, I said, I want everything on record. Back pay for my years of work at a fair rate. A formal contract with a salary, benefits, and clear responsibilities. Transparent payroll for all staff, not just your favorites. And a written commitment to change the way compensation decisions are made. And if we say no, Veronica challenged. I held her gaze. Then I file what I have with the board that licenses daycare centers, with a lawyer, with anyone who needs to see it. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had felt before. For the first time, I watched my mother calculate risk, not just emotion. She looked at Tyler, at the phone in my hand, at Veronica, whose bravado had finally begun to crack. You would do that, my mother whispered. To your own family? You already did this to me, I answered softly. I am just refusing to let it stay hidden. Have you ever seen the people who hold power over you realize in real time that you no longer fit neatly in the box they built for you? If you were sitting at that table, surrounded by family who had profited from your silence, would you back down? Or would you finally force them to choose between change and exposure? The weeks after that dinner felt like living in a different universe, one where everyone moved more carefully, as if the ground could split open at any moment. At first, my mother tried to negotiate in small, safe steps. She offered me a modest salary to start, insisted that back pay was complicated, and suggested we gradually introduce transparency measures for other staff. It was the same old pattern. Do the least possible and hope my love for the family would do the rest. But something in me had changed. Once you have seen the spreadsheets and heard the recordings, you cannot unknow them. You cannot go back to calling exploitation helping. I've spoken to a legal advisor, I told her one afternoon in the office, my voice calm. They confirmed that what has been happening is not just morally wrong, but potentially actionable. Underpayment, misclassification, misuse of funds earmarked as bonuses for staff. If you want to fix this quietly, it has to be real. No half measures. She looked tired in a way I had never seen before. Not just physically drained, but emotionally cornered. You would really drag this through the mud? She asked. Our name, our reputation, everything we have built. You did that the moment you decided some of us deserve to be invisible, I said. I am giving you a chance to repair it before someone else forces you to. It was not just a bluff. I had already spoken with Nina and one other ex-staff member who had similar stories. If my mother chose denial over change, I would not be standing alone. Eventually, the fear of outside consequences outweighed her desire to control the narrative. A formal audit was initiated internally first, Then, with the help of an external accountant, she begrudgingly hired. The numbers laid everything bare. Years of skewed bonuses, unexplained consulting fees, missing staff incentives. Veronica's name popped up again and again in places it did not belong. The fallout came in waves. Veronica was forced to resign from any official role connected to the daycare. My mother tried to frame it as a mutual decision and time for her to explore new opportunities, but the truth was simple. Her shadow consulting had become a liability. The repayment plan they eventually agreed on meant that a chunk of those bonuses had to be returned to the business or redistributed to staff who had been shortchanged. For someone who had built her identity on always landing on top, the public absence from the daycare's website and social media hit Veronica harder than she let on. The message was clear. Her days of cashing in on my work, unseen and unchallenged, were over. As for me, my role was finally defined in ink, not just an expectation. We drafted a contract with a lawyer's oversight. A real salary, benefits, back pay. Not everything I technically deserved, but enough to prove that my mother understood the difference between family helping and family being exploited. All staff roles were reviewed and adjusted. Time tracking became mandatory. Bonuses were documented and shared transparently with the team. Some days, looking at my name on the payroll, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and grief. This was what I had wanted for so long, but I resented how hard I had to fight for something that should have been basic respect. My relationship with my mother did not magically heal. There were awkward silences, apologies that came out clumsy and incomplete, moments where she slipped back into old habits, and I had to calmly remind her that things were different now. "Do you really think I never loved you?" she asked me once, voice tight. "I know you loved me," I answered. But love that asks one person to give everything and another to collect the rewards is not the kind of love I am willing to accept anymore. As for Veronica, our interactions became rare and brittle. She oscillated between anger and defensiveness, blaming me for ruining her comfortable setup. "You could have just kept this between us," she said during one bitter phone call. "We are sisters." "We are," I replied. "That is why I gave you the chance to face it in a private room before anyone else saw it. You chose denial. I chose myself. I will not pretend it did not hurt. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I had gone too far, if I had permanently fractured my family for the sake of money and principle. But then I would remember the moment my mother said she would never leave, even if we do not pay her, and I would realize this was not just about money. It was about what they believed I was worth. In the daycare itself, something else shifted too. Staff who had once been afraid to ask questions started speaking up. One of the newer teachers pulled me aside and said, "Thank you for whatever you did. I do not know the details, but things feel safer now." That meant more to me than any line on a contract. As for me, I stopped seeing myself as just the girl who loves the kids. I started seeing myself as someone whose work, time, and boundaries mattered. Maybe I would stay at the daycare for years. Maybe I would eventually open my own center or move into advocacy. But whatever I did, I knew one thing. No one would ever again be allowed to hide exploitation behind the sentence, "You're family, so you work for free." If your own mother told you that your love meant you did not deserve to be paid while your sibling cashed in on your effort, what would you do? Would you stay quiet to keep the peace? Or would you risk breaking the illusion of perfect family to build something more honest, even if it changed everything forever?